Welcome into Sports Memo's betting podcast for April 23rd. Happy Tuesday to you. It's $2 Tuesday at sportsmemo.com. Top play on the board, discounted to just $2. And Andrew McInnis has his play, a 5% play up at sportsmemo.com. Game 7 of the NHL tonight. Check that out at the website. But without further ado, McInnis, welcome into the podcast. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great, Drew. This feels like Christmas morning all over again. We got 2 Game 7s on tap. The NHL playoffs have been one of the most wacky playoffs I've seen, in my lifetime, and I've loved every single bit of it. So it's been great, and looking forward to this podcast. We got just 2 games, but decent amount of info to go over and discuss, and it should be a great night of hockey. How have you been, Drew? I haven't talked to you in a little while. How are things?
Things are good on my end, man. And you've got a bunch of NHL stuff you're putting out on the network. So lucky to have you on the Sports Memo podcast for today, especially today with 2 Game 7s tonight. So hopefully all the hockey fans out there get their fix on the podcast. But let's start off with the 7 o'clock game here on NBC Sports. 5.5 being the total. Looks like minus 138 to minus 145, depending where you're shopping. And that's the Bruins as the favorites hosting the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, it is Game 7. We got minus 140 price tag and a total of 5.5. How would you look to bet Toronto at Boston?
This is a game here, Drew, that everybody knew for a long, long time these teams were going to meet in the playoffs. And a lot of people knew as well this would be a very long series. And a lot of people thought as well it would go to Game 7. And here we are. We find ourselves in a Game 7 situation. Many people question if the zigzag theory is actually such a thing. And in this series, it's been exactly that. It's been Toronto Game 1, Boston Game 2, Toronto Game 3, Boston Game 4, etc. And here we are finding ourselves in a Game 7. And the funniest part is out of all of this is that we've been there, done that with these two teams so many times in the past. And of course, we have to go back to last year when Boston defeats Toronto 7-4 in that Game 7. So a very high scoring Game 7. And it's very interesting how times have really changed. It used to be that these Game 7s would be a little more tightly defensive and a little more aggressive. But it seems to be in this series, things have opened up quite a bit. But, these two teams have had such battles together. But the Leafs have had so many struggles. You look back in 2013, the Leafs blew a 3-goal lead and ended up losing 5-4 in 2013. I mean, that's just devastating. These players, they know what's at stake here tonight, and they know what the history between these two teams are. And when I look at this matchup and you hear so many different media outlets talk about this, I really do believe that Maple Leafs, in their head, they know that they have a mental disadvantage against this Boston Bruins team, as they've had chances to close out this series. They had an opportunity in Game 6 back home in Toronto to close out the series. They had a 1-0 lead. They couldn't protect it, and Boston comes out on top. And now the series goes back to Boston, and that's where Boston's comfortable. That's where they've played some great hockey. And I really look at this one here, and it could be a coin flip, but I got to look at the experience. That's what it really all comes down to once again. I mean, we've got the captain for the Boston Bruins, Zdeno Chara, playing his 13th career Game 7. It's unbelievable, and the fact is, this Toronto team is still very, very young, and that's what really worries me, Drew. You look back to that 2013 matchup in the Game 7 between these two teams, only 2 players remain on this team that were actually a part of that 2013 contest. And actually one of them, Nazem Kadri, is suspended. So that just leaves Jake Gardiner. And Jake Gardiner is a player that not a lot of people can trust in big games because we know he had a very weak performance in last year's Game 7. The fact is these two teams are going to clash, and they're going to go out all guns blazing, and they're going to play very aggressive. But a very interesting note that I wanted to touch on this podcast was the Leafs have actually played some outstanding 5-on-5 hockey. The Leafs have 11 goals, 5-on-5 action, even strength in this series. So their only trouble really has been, their penalty issues and staying out of the box and getting into the style of the Bruins game. I think the biggest problem for the Leafs is that they've had such an issue dealing with the aggression of the Boston Bruins. And for so many years, that's really been their style of play. And it really does irritate and get under the skin of some of the younger guys on the Leafs. I mean, this Bruins team only 8 5-on-5 goals in this series so far. But yet here we are tonight, a Game 7. So that just goes to show how lethal their power play has been. And I think it's very important to mention as well how strong Frederik Andersen has been for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He'll have to be huge here tonight. Third best goals against average in the league with 5-on-5 action, right behind Robin Lehner and Philip Grubauer. So I think looking at this one here, it's a real coin flip. But again, I'm going with the experience here. I think the Boston Bruins can get things done, and they're going to be a lot more comfortable. You've got guys like Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner that have been very iffy in this series. You know, Austin Matthews has a couple goals to kind of account for himself, but other than that, you look down the list, you look down for the guys that are supposed to get the job done, and they simply haven't been there. It sounds very cliche to say, Drew, but in a Game 7 and in a series like this, your best guys really do have to be your best guys, and that hasn't really been the case for this Toronto Maple Leafs team. And you know, you look at the list here. Brad Marchand has been there. David Pastrnak has been there. Patrice Bergeron has been there. David Krejci has been there at the top of the list for scorers in this series, and those are the top guys for the Boston Bruins. However, we don't see the top guys for the Maple Leafs on the top of that list, and that's what's really hurt them in this series. And if they're going to be successful tonight, they are going to have to come out and have a good showing. And very interesting to note as well that Mike Babcock is just 3 of 4 for Game 7s in his career coaching. And if he drops this Game 7, that'll be 3 straight series that he has dropped since he has been signed as the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it's notable to mention he is by far the highest paid coach in the league. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure on him as well. So, you know, looking at things, the way they've shaped up as well, and notable to mention, I did want to talk about Patrice Bergeron because I do believe he is the best two-way forward in the NHL. And what I mean by two-way forward is he plays so great on both ends of the ice. He is so accountable defensively, but also offensively. Patrice Bergeron is 62% with faceoffs this series on 139 draws. And that is incredible. That is outstanding, especially for the playoffs. He has been so reliable, especially in the defensive end. And I feel like especially on power plays, he's been dominating Zach Hyman, and Hyman hasn't really been able to kind of match up with him on the faceoffs, and that's really hurt the team. Looking at this one here, to kind of sum it up, I'm going with the experience. I'm going with the Boston Bruins. I currently have a future on them to win the Eastern Conference. I also jumped on them today at plus 850 to win the Stanley Cup. I recommend anyone that really thinks either of these teams are going to win this game tonight, don't even really make a wager on this game. I'd say just go ahead and make a wager on them to win the East, because I really do believe in my heart, Drew, that whoever wins this series will most likely come out on top in the Eastern Conference. That's how good both of these teams are. It's going to be an incredible game. It's going to be an end-to-end action. I expect to see lots of goals, but you don't really know what to expect from the goaltenders, and that's really going to be they're going to be the ones dictating how this game plays out as far as goals wise. But realistically, as far as this Boston team goes, their top guys have shown up, and Toronto Maple Leafs top guys haven't really been there consistently. So that will really be the biggest test. How much ice time will Coach Babcock give Austin Matthews, give Mitch Marner? We'll have to find out. But we're on tap for a really good game here tonight, Drew. I expect to see a really exciting one. Lots of shots for both teams. But I just think the experience will be too much for the Toronto Maple Leafs to handle once again this year. They are a different team. I will understand that. But I feel like their opportunity to close out the series in Game 6, they missed out on that. And now we're back in Boston. We know how great Boston plays at home. I think the Bruins get it done.
Good breakdown, McInnis, and he has his 5% NHL Leafs vs. Bruins play up at sportsmemo.com, and with the podcast coupon code NHL9, you can get it for just $9. It's up on the site for $30, but with the coupon code NHL9 at checkout, you can get tonight's 5% top-rated NHL Leafs versus Bruins ticket from Andrew McInnis for just $9. Coupon code NHL9. And McInnis, you bring up ice time. I mean, with it being Game 7, I would think the coach would play the best players, full throttle, as much ice time as possible. Is that not the case?
Well, I'm looking at it right now, Drew, as far as last year's series between these two teams compared to this year, and we're seeing an impeccable difference here, especially for a player, Kasperi Kapanen. He averaged 11 minutes a game last year in this exact series. Now he's averaging 17 minutes. That's a huge, huge jump, and that's just kind of it goes to show that he's now playing with a lot better players. But that it's a great question, Drew, because each coach, Bruce Cassidy has been different for the Bruins, and Mike Babcock has been different for the Leafs. But I really do wonder if Mike Babcock will keep out Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Nylander, Marleau, those guys a lot more tonight than usual. Because those guys, like I said, the top guys have to be successful tonight in order for them to succeed. But then you look at the Boston Bruins lineup here, and it's very spread out. You've got guys like DeBrusk, Krejci, Pasternak, Marchand, Bergeron, all averaging roughly the same amount of ice time. So I think personally that this Leafs team is at a disadvantage depth-wise in this series right now because top line versus top line, the Bruins have it. And the Leafs depth has to show up as well. But when it comes down to it, in a Game 7 situation, like you reverted to, the top guys have to be your top guys. It's Game 7. You got to play them as much as you can.
And McInnis, is it ever, like, if there's one or maybe two best players, that those two best players will play more, or they have to stay on the same lines? So, like, let's just say it's getting late in the game and it's a line switch. But would you ever just keep your best player out there to play with a different line, or no? You have to always play with the same guys.
No, absolutely. Certain coaches, specifically actually Coach Cassidy for the Bruins, has juggled his lines a lot this series, a lot more than Coach Babcock has for the Leafs. And certain times there's double shifting and stuff like that, Drew. But a lot of times it would be just more so happening when you're on the bench, just changing up who you're going back onto the ice with. And for sure, it's to really kind of close, mix things up and try and throw off the other team. A very interesting note as well to add to your question is now that the Bruins are back at home, they get the last change between whistles, which means they get to see who the Leafs are sending out before they get to send out their guys. So that's a very interesting part of hockey that not a lot of people realize as far as home ice advantage goes. So literally, the Maple Leafs will be sending out their crew of guys, and then the referee says, okay, those are your guys. And then he looks over at the Boston coach and he says, okay, who are you sending out now? So the Bruins get an advantage at that aspect for sure, just being able to see who the Leafs are sending out and then reacting that way and sending out their guys.
That's interesting, man. Every time I ask, like, what's the biggest home field advantages, home ice advantages in hockey, nobody ever brings that up. But that's the biggest one, in my opinion, right? It
is, yeah. And to be honest with you, I've mostly started taking it into account, like, just over the past year when you notice certain coaches really juggling it. And the problem is, though, Drew, is that I feel like some coaches have a little more fun with it than others. And I have to bring it up. There was a reporter asked Mike Babcock at the press conference. He said, Coach, is this a time for you to mix things up and take some chances and try some new things? And he very seriously said back to him, no, we're not going to try new things, but thanks for the suggestion and the idea. So from the sounds of it, the Leafs won't really be trying new things and juggling things around. But I feel like if it gets off to a slow start for the Bruins, they're not scared to mix things up, that's for sure. And yeah, I think it's a cool point. I'm glad I brought that up, Drew. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And we got a doubleheader tonight. That was the 7 o'clock game on NBC Sports, at least to the American watchers. And also same channel here, 10 p.m. Eastern puck drop. And guys, remember, McInnis has his 5% top-rated NHL play going tonight, and you can get it for just $9 using the coupon code NHL9 at checkout. But let's head out west for Vegas, San Jose. We got a total of 6 here, 5.5 at some shops, so make sure to shop around if you are betting this total because it's bouncing around, seeing bookmakers showing it at 5.5. 6 at most other shops, but minus 115 to minus 112 favorites here. That's San Jose laying at home. How are you looking to bet the Golden Knights versus the Sharks here tonight, McInnis?
I'm telling you, June, whether it's a 5.5 or a 6, I will be on the over in this one. I am a lot more confident taking this play on the total in this game than I am on the side. I'll get to that in a second, my thoughts on the side. But when you look at this series, you come into this and you realize that the Vegas Golden Knights had the far superior goaltender in Marc-Andre Fleury. And that was the biggest concern for the San Jose Sharks was, will Martin Jones step up? Will Martin Jones rise to the occasion? And in the past 2 games, he certainly has. He has been there. He has been their backbone, especially in that last game. It was a 2-1, low-scoring, very tightly played game. San Jose was plus 170 underdogs. They got the job done to force it to a Game 7. But we can't really, undermine how this series started out. I mean, 5-2, 5-3, 6-3. I mean, these were some high-scoring games, and there are some very, very lethal forwards on both these two teams. And like I said at the start of this podcast, Drew, back in the day, and I know I'm pretty young, so I can't really be throwing around that phrase, but back in the day, there used to be a lot of unders on elimination-style games here in the NHL. But things have really changed. Things have really moved forwards. It's a goal scorers league now. For there's a few teams you have circled, of course, that are your under teams and win lower scoring games. But more so than not, elimination games lead to higher amount of overs, and I think it's due to the high pressure in the third period. It's due to empty net goals. Goalies being pulled a lot earlier. But I think it's both teams wanting to get out that hot start. We saw it yesterday with the Washington Capitals and the Carolina Hurricanes in Game 6 in the elimination game for Carolina. We saw 3 goals in that first period. And a lot of people would say maybe they're going to come out and be a little bit cautious. Maybe they're going to come out and, just play very tight. But that was the exact opposite in that game, and I feel like we'll see the exact same thing in this contest. Like I mentioned, we've got so many guys here. Right now, this Vegas team has practically 2 top lines. I mean, McPhee is probably the best general manager in the NHL right now. And Drew, this Vegas team is only in its second year. It's unbelievable what he's been able to do. I feel like he could pick up somebody off the street and turn them into an all-star forward right now. He's done that great. I mean, with Max Pacioretty, Paul Stastny, and Mark Stone, I mean, his whole second line, Drew, is all new players that weren't on that original, starting off team for the Vegas Golden Knights. It's been so impressive. At one point in the playoffs, Pacioretty, Stastny, and Stone were all the top 3 highest points in the NHL, and they're all on the same line. So I thought that was very interesting, and I just feel like things certainly will open up. And you got to look at the defense as well. You got Nate Schmidt, you got Shea Theodore, Braden McNabb. These are all defensive players that love to move the puck up the ice. They're puck-moving defensemen. They're not guys that sit back, and that's what I look for. It's the same thing with Erik Karlsson. It's the same thing with Vlasic, same thing with Burns. These are guys that are willing to push the puck up the ice. Certain teams have defensemen that will sit back and they know their role. They know that they don't have to jump into the rush. They're very solid back there. Their job is to simply defend their side of the ice. That's not what these two teams do. They have a pace of the game, and they will certainly show it tonight. I believe that it kind of really worked well in our favor that we saw a lower scoring game in the last time around, because we saw an opener of the 5.5, and it just kind of makes me laugh that we saw a 5.5 open up, because the way this series opened up, and I don't think we can see that many solid outings from Martin Jones back to back times without his team having to give him a little bit of goal support. So I really see the floodgates opening up here in the Vegas versus San Jose contest. And it's funny because this whole playoffs, Drew, has been so wacky. I mean, and when I say that, I mean Tampa Bay being one of the best teams ever to exist out of the past, decade, and they get swept in the first round by Columbus. And I'm talking about Calgary in the Western Conference losing to Colorado in the first round. Also Winnipeg being out, Pittsburgh being out. All these teams everybody loves to follow, and over this past generation has been so great, have now fallen off, and we're seeing a lot of different teams elevating. And, with Vegas and San Jose being a first-round matchup, I'm going to say as well for this series, just as I did for the Toronto and Boston, I feel like whoever wins this series is going to have a very good opportunity to go all the way to the Stanley Cup. My lean still would be on the Vegas Golden Knights, simply because I believe they have more depth scoring, and I believe they do have the stronger goaltender. I know home ice advantage does go to San Jose in this one, but I just feel like overall Vegas is a more well-rounded team. San Jose will need all bounces to go their way, and they'll need an outstanding performance from their goaltender for them to have a shot in this game, whereas I feel like this will come a lot easier to Vegas. I mean, you look at when Vegas has won their games, they've been a lot more dominant. I mean, back on April 16th, their 5-0 win, we haven't seen anything like that from San Jose. All of their wins have been very tightly contested. So those are kind of my thoughts on these two games tonight. And like I said, Drew, I couldn't be more excited. I woke up today in a great mood, just looking forward to creating my notes all day, going through things, and looking forward to watching these games tonight. So it should be great.
All right, good stuff, McInnis. And guys, remember his 5% NHL lease first Bruins top-rated play for tonight's action, discounted to just $9 using the coupon code NHL9 at checkout. So thank you, McInnis, for the time. Guys, best of luck with your bets tonight. We'll be back tomorrow talking Borman on the podcast, soccer podcast for tomorrow. So thanks for the time, McInnis, and best of luck with your bets, guys.